Welcome to our channel. We're excited to have you with us today for a story that's full of surprises and unexpected moments. As you watch, we'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let us know. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss tomorrow's special story. Trust us, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for joining us, and let's dive into today's incredible tale. A drunken, unemployed tourist pushes a royal guard too far, the shocking moment. As the evening settled over Buckingham Palace, the scene was calm and peaceful. The last of the tourists trickled out through the gates, leaving the area bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. The tranquil atmosphere contrasted sharply with the stillness of the royal guard. Ethan Cole, standing tall at his post. His scarlet uniform was sharp against the darkening sky, a symbol of tradition and duty. Every day, he stood in this spot, his eyes scanning the crowds, alert for any hint of disturbance. Years of training had taught him to detect even the smallest signs of trouble. Tonight, the air was still, and the only sounds were the rustle of leaves in the breeze and the occasional click of a camera. But suddenly, the peace shattered. The sound of shattering glass pierced the air, followed by drunken laughter. Ethan's senses immediately went on high alert. He had seen his fair share of loud tourists, but this was different. A man, Tom Harris, in his mid-30s, appeared at the gates, stumbling drunkenly. His bloodshot eyes locked onto Ethan, a cruel smirk playing across his face. Tom, who reeked of beer, started to taunt Ethan, calling him a fancy doorman, mocking his ceremonial uniform. Ethan stood motionless, his training kicking in. He cataloged every detail of Tom's movements, the unsteady gait, the beer stains on his shirt, and the way his hands clenched into fists. Tom circled him, hurling insults, trying to provoke a response. The crowd began to gather, some of them filming the scene on their phones, others watching with concern. Ethan's mind raced through the protocols. He knew that any reaction could escalate the situation. He had faced hecklers before, but Tom's aggression was different. There was a dangerous edge to his behavior. The crowd's whispers grew louder, urging Tom to back off. But the drunken man only became more defiant. His words became more personal, more biting. "What's the matter, mate? Cat got your tongue?" he sneered. Ethan could feel the sweat starting to trickle down his neck as the pressure mounted. His training had prepared him to handle hecklers, but the hostility was pushing him to his limits. The moment was reaching its breaking point. Ethan's resolve was about to be tested in a way it never had before. As Tom Harris's insults continued, the atmosphere shifted, growing thicker with tension. Ethan Cole stood firm, every muscle coiled beneath his uniform, but his mind was racing. He had trained for years to remain still in the face of ridicule, but tonight, something felt different. The crowd was growing larger, and with every harsh word from Tom, the sense of unease deepened. Some people were filming, others whispering nervously, caught between fascination and concern. The air felt charged, as if a storm was brewing, and Ethan could feel it in the pit of his stomach. Tom circled him, moving dangerously close, his taunts growing louder and more personal. "Bet you think you're better than us, don't you?" Tom sneered, taking a step forward and invading Ethan's personal space. The crowd grew uncomfortable, some of them stepping back, while others shouted for Tom to stop. But the drunk tourist was too far gone. He wasn't just looking for attention. His words were laced with hostility, and Ethan could see the malice in his eyes. This wasn't just a silly prank. This was a direct challenge to his authority and to the very traditions he stood to protect. The insults came faster, each one meant to break Ethan's composure. "Look at you, all dressed up like a bloody nutcracker," Tom mocked. Ethan felt the weight of his training press down on him. He knew he couldn't react. He had to remain still, to maintain the dignity of his post. But the taunting was relentless, and Tom's presence felt more threatening with every step. Then, without warning, Tom stumbled forward, his face contorted with anger, and flicked the shiny button on Ethan's uniform. It was a minor gesture, but to Ethan, it felt like an assault on everything he stood for. His hands clenched, and the instinct to react almost overwhelmed him. Tom was pushing him to the edge, testing the very limits of his restraint. The situation had shifted from annoying heckling to something far more dangerous. Ethan could feel the pressure building, the boundary between maintaining order and taking action growing dangerously thin. The crowd waited, breathless, sensing that something had to give. The situation was now spiraling out of control. Tom Harris's taunts were no longer just loud insults, they were becoming personal, and his actions more threatening. As Ethan Cole stood motionless, the crowd was becoming visibly uncomfortable. Some people were nervously whispering, others had their phones out, capturing the moment. Tom was relentless, pushing further into Ethan's personal space, testing the limits of his restraint. His drunken ranting grew louder, with every word more cutting than the last. "What's the matter with you, huh?" Tom sneered. "You too posh to even talk to us, you statue?" Then, in an instant, Tom took things a step further. He reached out and flicked the polished button on Ethan's uniform. The action wasn't just disrespectful, it was an invasion of personal space, a direct challenge to the Royal Guard's dignity. The crowd gasped, some reacting with alarm as Ethan's training was tested to its absolute limits. Ethan stood still, his jaw clenched, but inside, the pressure was mounting. His grip tightened subtly on the rifle he held, the only outward sign of the tension building within him. Tom, sensing Ethan's internal struggle, emboldened by the lack of a response, continued to provoke. "What's it going to take to get a reaction from you, eh? Maybe you're just a pretty mannequin, all show, no action." The crowd was now murmuring, some telling Tom to back off, but he was too far gone. He stumbled closer, his breath sour with alcohol. With a malicious grin, he raised his beer and sloshed it across Ethan's uniform, the liquid staining the pristine fabric. The crowd fell silent. The insult was no longer just verbal, it was physical. This was a direct attack on Ethan's dignity, on everything the Royal Guard stood for. The moment hung heavy in the air. Ethan felt the weight of tradition, the centuries of duty he represented, pressing down on him. But as Tom swayed dangerously close, taunting him with slurred words, Ethan knew the time for patience was running out. The rules of engagement were clear. Remain still unless physically threatened. But the line between verbal provocation and physical threat was beginning to blur. In that moment, Ethan could feel his composure start to crack. He had endured insults, slurs, and mockery, but this was different. This was personal, and he could feel the shift inside him. The calm was slipping away. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Ethan Cole stood rigid, his eyes locked on Tom Harris, who now leaned in close, his breath hot and heavy with alcohol. Tom's actions had crossed every line. He had flicked Ethan's uniform, splashed beer on him, and now he was dangerously close to crossing the ultimate line. The crowd had fallen into a stunned silence, a sense of dread hanging over them. Some were still recording, others too nervous to speak, waiting for Ethan's next move. But the Royal Guard didn't flinch. Ethan's training had prepared him for moments like this, but even the most disciplined soldier had a breaking point. Tom was swaying, his words slurred as he leaned forward, mocking Ethan with a sneer. "What's it going to take, huh? You gonna stand there all night like a statue, or are you gonna do something?" His words were dripping with malice, his eyes wild with drunken aggression. He stepped forward again, this time crossing into Ethan's personal space completely. His hand reached up, pushing against Ethan's bare skin cap, the symbol of the Royal Guard's centuries-old tradition, the crown jewel of his uniform. That was the moment. Ethan felt his muscles tense, his body readying for what he knew was coming. He had tried to hold his ground, to maintain his discipline, but Tom's blatant disrespect had pushed him to his limit. In a flash, Ethan's military training took over. Without hesitation, he delivered a sharp, powerful kick to Tom's groin, sending him crashing to the ground with a yelp of pain. The sound of Tom hitting the ground echoed through the crowd, which erupted in a mix of gasps and nervous laughter. Ethan stood unmoving, his expression unchanged, as Tom lay on the ground writhing in pain. The crowd was silent for a moment, some in shock, others clearly relieved that the tension had finally broken. But Ethan remained still, his posture as perfect as ever. His uniform was now stained with beer, but his dignity was intact. In that instant, Ethan had done what his training demanded. He had defended the honor of the Royal Guard and maintained order at Buckingham Palace. The crowd, now murmuring, began to disperse, but they had witnessed something extraordinary. A royal guard, as Ethan Cole stood at attention, the aftermath of the confrontation hung in the air, thick with tension. Tom Harris had been quickly escorted away by security, still groaning in pain, a painful reminder of the consequences of his disrespect. The crowd, which had once been filled with nervous energy and whispers, began to dissipate, but the buzz of what had just happened lingered. Some onlookers were still trying to process what they had witnessed. A royal guard, known for his unyielding composure, had just reacted with swift precision. Ethan's actions had been sharp, calculated, and non-lethal, but it was clear that he had asserted control over a dangerous situation. For Ethan, the relief wasn't immediate. He stood tall, his posture as perfect as ever, but inside there was a subtle shift. His hands, still gripping his rifle with a force that almost went unnoticed, were slowly relaxing, the tightness in his muscles easing. Despite everything that had just happened, he had done what was necessary. Ethan had upheld the honor of Buckingham Palace, the royal guard, and the traditions he had sworn to protect. He had done so without a single word, relying solely on his training and discipline. But the moment wasn't over. The echoes of Tom's insults, the splashing of beer, and the drunken taunts still hung in the air. The crowd, though it had begun to disperse, remained in hushed conversation. Some were praising Ethan's quick response, while others debated the ethics of his actions. Had he overreacted? Or was it the right thing to do? One thing was certain. The respect for the royal guard had been reinforced, and the line between ceremonial duty and real-world action had been made crystal clear. Ethan remained stoic, as he had been trained to do. His eyes remained forward, unwavering, but in his mind, he reflected on the strange irony of the situation. Tom had tried to mock the traditions he stood for, but in the end, it was those very traditions that had given him the strength to act. In that moment, Ethan wasn't just standing guard at Buckingham Palace. He was standing for centuries of history, for discipline, and for the integrity of the crown itself. What do you think about the confrontation between Ethan Cole and Tom Harris? Was Ethan justified in his response, or do you think there was a better way to handle the situation? It's fascinating how a moment of disrespect could push someone to their breaking point, especially when they've spent years learning to stay composed. But was it right for Ethan to use force to defend his honor and the traditions of the Royal Guard? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe that the strict rules of engagement the Royal Guards follow are necessary, or do they need to evolve with the times? How do you think the public's reaction reflects on society's expectations of respect for authority and tradition? And what about Tom Harris? Could he have acted differently? His behavior clearly crossed a line, but do you think there's room for more understanding between the public and the guards? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with more fascinating stories like this one. We'll be back tomorrow with another tale that's sure to make you think.